Water is fundamental to life, and our freshwater systems are vital networks within the web of biodiversity. Some of the most important habitats to be found in Irish farms are freshwater wetlands, and County Clare is home to some of the best examples in Europe. But they are vulnerable. The vast majority of them are undocumented and unprotected. Dr. Simon Harrison was part of a recent research project which looked at the drivers of biodiversity change in Ireland. And he looked in detail at wetlands. Simon, what sort of wetland is this?
Duncan, there are two main types of wetland in Ireland. One, rain-fed, which is what people call bog, very common in the west. And the other, perhaps less common, is groundwater-fed. And you can see here the rocks are limestone. Limestone has a lot of water, and water flows through it. And in depressions such as this, where you have a little valley wetland, the water comes to the surface and gives you this very wet wetland conditions. These are called fens.
And are they protected?
Very few of them are, but most of these fens are embedded in farmland. Many of them are not even known about.
So what sort of species can we see here?
The typical vegetation is tall grass, rush, sedge, reed mace. You notice perhaps there's plenty of swallows flying around this evening. There's lots of midges coming out from these fens. They're a great source of production of aerial insects.
One of the biggest pressures on wetlands is the effect of over-enrichment by nutrients. Nutrients come from fertilisers and animal and human sewage. They have a negative effect on wetland habitats and on biodiversity. So why should farmers protect them?
These wetlands they're not unique in Ireland, but they're very rare in a European context. Most fens have been lost throughout Europe due to drainage and conversion to agricultural, to intensive agriculture, particularly since the Second World War. The ones we have in Ireland then haven't been drained represent a very special European resource. And they're of very high value because the species that live in them, the plants and the invertebrates, mammals and the amphibians, are not found anywhere else.
Simon Harrison was part of the Biochange research study, Ireland's first comprehensive assessment of the condition of our biodiversity. The report was funded by the Environmental Protection Agency as part of the STRIVE programme, and it looked at a wide variety of Irish habitats. It concluded that the current decline in our biodiversity is comparable to the major extinctions in history. Yet biodiversity underpins the ecological functions that provide the many natural goods and services on which life, livelihoods and sustainable living depend. When it came to wetlands, the results of the research were surprising.
We expected to find that big, undisturbed, unpolluted fens would be more biodiverse, more valuable than these small, isolated, fragmented and damaged fens. But that wasn't the case at all. We actually found that the diversity and the numbers of rare species of these kind of habitats, these kind of small, isolated fens, very typical of farmland, were just as biodiverse than the larger, more well-known, well-protected fens that are much more naturalistic. But these are extremely valuable as well.
James Howard farms on the Burren Conservation Programme, and he maintains a turlough on his land. A turlough is a seasonal lake which appears in winter and disappears again in summer. Rising from channels and swallow holes underneath the limestone, it can stay for as little as 6 days, or as long as 6 months. So when it comes to grazing this area, you know, obviously the water level goes up and down. How do you manage to graze this? And
well, it's important to graze it, because if you don't, if the grasses grow too high, the water will come in and it will decay, and it will cause a pollution in itself. Like, it's a form of pollution itself. But the few cows I have there, they do a great job in it. Like.
The Burn Life programme devised a pellet feed for cattle, which provides an alternative to feeding silage at round feeders, where the build-up of cow dung can threaten the nearby water systems.
The meal feeding is very handy because you can change your place every day, and you're not feeding them in the one spot. Try and feed them as far away from it as you can in the winter time, and as it is dry in the summertime, then just give the cows, little cows, give them a couple of grazings during the summertime. And that seems to, up to now, manage it okay anyway.
The Burren and the wetlands within it are universally acknowledged as precious habitats. But what of the wetlands in the rest of the country? Are these as valuable and worth protecting? Karen Dubsky of Coastwatch Europe is a wetlands expert. I met her in County Wexford.
The willow can take moisture from the water, can actually clean water.
Karen, what's special about this wetland here?
This wetland is, first of all, it's teeming with life. If you look around, there are actually birds all over around us. But in terms of habitat, it's a very rare habitat. It's a wet woodland. These are all native, indigenous species which stand with their feet in water.
So for people watching tonight, Karen, why are wetlands so important?
Wetlands have a huge range of different functions. If you didn't have this big wet woodland here, if you just say had a field here, the rain falling down would run off and silt after rain, lots of silt and mush would get into the next river or the sea. If you have a wet woodland, it just fills up and then all the plant roots start munching it away, and what comes out at the other side is really clean water. So cleaning is a huge function if you have an intact wetland.
The benefits that wetlands provide of pure water, clean air, wildlife habitats and flood control are critical for the surrounding countryside and towns. The consequences of destroying wetlands are being felt across Europe. Denmark now gives farmers money to reconstruct wetlands on their farms. But here in Ireland, farmers are under pressure to produce. And are there a lot of farmers draining their land?
At the moment, I can observe a lot of scrubland removal and infill of small ponds. That is really noticeable over the last few months. All the incentives at the moment are towards loss. That is why the perversity of farmers who have such incredibly important role, like a farmer who owns some reed bed, will not get single payment for that area. Like a wet woodland like this would not get single farm payment, even though it has an enormous value for the next town, which mightn't get flooded or be at less risk of flooding.
So what would you say to farmers now that have wetlands and really appreciate them?
In a very short time, I would say in a year or two, we should have awards and recognition for farmers with good wetlands. So hold out. Only around the corner will be the day where you get money for wetlands in good condition, so that you can afford to keep your wetlands.
Wetlands are a vital part of the chain of ecosystems, which both protect us from the extremes of nature and preserve the species of our waters and land. Research such as the Biochange report shows that if we look after the smallest of our ecosystems, such as hedgerows, woodlands and ponds, we have at least a chance of preserving the whole fabric of our biodiversity, which benefits us in so many ways.